Hey, hopefully this won't get all messed up. I tried to record this a moment ago and it didn't work. Um, okay, so reshoot. Free will and determinism. Um, so in your video, you basically mentioned that there's a new study that challenges this um, I guess scientific argument that the brain makes a decision potentially before the person decides to actually take that decision to hand. So, in other words, people think they choose, but really their brain's acting before they even choose. Um, and then this new study came out and it said, well, no, not really. That potential is actually the brain preparing to choose, or the mind consciousness getting ready to do something, paying attention to an action. So it's not really that we something chooses before we do. Um, I never really, I mean, this is not an easily answerable question, but I guess to put things in another point of view, I never really cared for either argument. I thought they were far too narrow. I mean, the determinist view that our consciousness is epiphenomenal to some degree, that we have this illusion of choice, but really it's just our brains doing this and that, and more or less. And then the opposite, inherently there is this free entity that is able to choose. I think that they both kind of make many assumptions that kind of encapsulate both arguments and create some kind of false duality. Um, I mean, if we saw this from another philosophical lineage, such as, I don't know, in Taoism or in Eastern philosophy, they might say this whole free will and determinism, well, consciousness must be somewhere in between, because um, complementary characteristics or traits, create each other, they coexist, they are interdependent. So what one thing appears to be is only in relation to another thing. And without opposites, if opposites did not have each other, there would be no um, complementary aspect to reality, night and day, good and evil, black and white, these sort of things. So, I mean, thinking it this way, I guess my question is for you and any of your listeners and my listeners, um, how can we see this paradox, the whole freedom and determinism paradox, in a different light, as um, you know, the consciousness having complementary components, stuff that's quote unquote causal and determined, and also some other aspect that is um, more free to move around without being pushed like a domino. I mean, there's a subtle hint in the determinism argument that we don't really choose. We're actually just affected by our environment constantly. Um, so this gets murky very quickly for two reasons. One, to state that, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because the even if you're talking on purely psychological terms, there's causes for everything. Somebody acted this way, so now we act this way. Um, there's a lot of us deep down are very reactionary. The environment helps mold us. Um, so it might make sense to go the determinist way. Because if our environment molds us in certain ways, if we behave and feel and think in certain patterns in response to our environment growing up, um, and also in response to just having genetics and having a brain that has a certain chemical composition, these sort of things seem to be completely causal and determined, albeit very random, but determined. But then on the other hand, there seems to be a degree of awareness and choice that is a little bit more free than that. It's able to um, adapt or become more pliable. So there seems to be complementary aspects to our consciousness. things that are not entirely determined and molded by our environment, and things that somewhat are. So somehow the human being is in the middle between these two philosophies that, mind you, we've thought up to begin with. So there may be some inherent assumptions that we're doing that limit our perception of this. But I think standing somewhere in between here, not really taking one view or another, is an interesting approach. Um, so another thing I would like to add is, of course, the synergistic qualities of just being a human. I always use the example of a tornado or a hurricane as being, you know, the elements that brought it into existence are causal elements. You know, temperature, wind, rain, humidity, heat, cold, all that creates a hurricane, and it seems to be all causal. So if the human brain and its movements and the human being, you can say, has all of these physically definable properties as to what brought us here to where we are. But just like a hurricane, I think we have some causal properties to us. The synergy of all these different things come together and allow us to be more than just a determination of variables. We can come back and, as they might say, create create a storm. Maybe we have some causal components, but then we also have some effectual components. We affect the environment back, and that reverb sort of thing is often, I don't know, I feel like this isn't talked about too much. So I guess I'll leave you with all of that, and I know this kind of went in a different philosophical direction, but I'd gladly take it back to the topic of the experiments that you mentioned. Um, I believe that is it. So yeah, great video, and thanks for the links, especially the new scientist link. That was very informative. Thanks a lot.